brought it out of it's outside the state. Of course, they have enormous influence, but the reason they have enormous influence is because the state is structured to be reproducing their power and authority in society.
Leo Panich, who's an economist and analyst.
400.
I think he offered a perspective that we really haven't heard before. He's sort of fighting against the conspiratorial.
300.
That there's a small group of people in a room somewhere running things. He's talking about the structure of the society, the values of it, and really runs things.
100. 50. 40. 30. 20.
Thousands of interconnected firms that call themselves a financial
10.
services industry, but they are much more than that.
5.
Involved with how our country is run, says Robert Weissman, the head of the public interest group, Public Citizen.
Airbus 310, turn next taxiway.
In the past, investors would buy stocks in companies and industries that generated jobs, provided services, or created new products of value. Those days are gone. Then we went from an economy of production, making things, to one based on consumption, buying and selling things. Consumers soon drove 70% of the economy as banks, private equity companies, and hedge funds.
Airbus 310, exit runway when able.
So consumers went deeper and deeper into debt. And then bankers bought and sold debt while they changed the rules regulating their activities.
Airbus 310, exit runway when able.
Investor George Soros told years ago that capitalist economy is also inherently unstable and prone to bubbles and crashes. I built the theory that financial markets are inherently unstable and prevent excesses with some kind of intervention.
Airbus 310, turn next taxiway.
So we work with a false concept of how financial markets are. Controls have their own problems. Markets are much more efficient than centralized controls. But it doesn't mean that
Airbus 310, exit runway when able.
The problem this time is the dramatic surge in debt. Look at this. These are charts showing the debt of the United States, page after page, illustrating how much money is owed. It's mind-boggling. It gets even more complicated when you start talking about new financial instruments like derivatives.
Airbus 310, exit runway when able. Airbus 310, contact ground on 121.9.
Going to 121.9 Airbus 310.
Like in a casino. Financial journalist Max Kaiser says just a handful of big financial firms now dominate the industry and the global economy. Without a doubt, there's JP Morgan, which is in bed with the Fed and the central banking system. Wall Street bets on future values and the performance of
Lagos ground Airbus 310 taxi to the gate.
Goldman Sachs
Airbus 310 taxi to gate 42 via taxiway Delta cross runway tree 6 right, Charlie Bravo.
Financiers and executives of a small number of investment banks
Taxiing to gate 42 using taxiway Delta cross runway tree 6 right, Charlie Bravo, Airbus 310.
They are connected to the central banking system, which is the Fed, ECB, the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland is kind of the central bank of the central bank. And these are the folks that are keeping, their main purpose at this point is to keep interest rates as close to zero as possible, to make it as cheap as possible for people who are borrowing money to speculate, to be able to speculate freely without having to pay for the money that they're borrowing to speculate.
These financial markets are supposedly open to all sent him to prison. We began by comparing Wall Street to the Titanic, the unsinkable ship that sank.
If the Titanic were the story today, the difference would be that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan would have heavy bets that would pay off when the ship sinks, and Hank Paulson would be down there widening the gash.
It brings me to a new study out just recently, and they looked at hundreds of shipwrecks throughout the past few hundred years. What they found is that the norm is actually for women and children to die more frequently than men, and that the captain usually didn't go down with the ship. They were usually, their survival rate was the highest.
These guys, they use derivatives, as Warren Buffett calls them, weapons of mass financial destruction, to make situations worse, because their bets that they have on these calamities becoming worse pay off enormously, and we see that in the numbers in the bonuses. It's reflected.
Andy, you were nodding before when Max was speaking about all of this. Is this really true that they're betting against, us in a sense, betting against, hoping for bad things to happen?
I don't think that everybody that works on Wall Street has this mentality, but there is a culture that's in place where people have learned to at least accept and justify behavior like looking at these investments, betting investments against, things to fail, whether it be a government, whether it be a country, or whether it be a company to fail, and say, oh, well, I can justify this, and you look at it like it's numbers. You don't look at the people behind it. You don't look at the families that suffer. You don't look at the country that suffers as a result.
Well, here's what is mind-boggling to me, is you are presenting a picture of intentionality, that people did things to further their own interests. They knew what they were doing. It was calculated, and yet, in most of the media, it seems as if it's presented as some sort of mistake, as miscalculation. Gee, we wanted housing to go up, but it went down. You can't blame us. Everybody was doing it, therefore nobody was doing it, therefore nobody can be prosecuted.
Well, let's assume that there was intention. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Some would argue that it's a good thing to have people who are parasites in an economy, because parasites are useful. I have parasites in my intestines. They perform a useful function. The problem is the parasites don't run my heart, lungs, and brain.
Lagos ground Airbus tree 10. Could you please send a ground power unit?
Governing them, so the parasites
Airbus tree 10, a ground power unit is on the road.
Capital is Wall Street affecting our policy making? Well, they're becoming our policymakers, at least for a short period of time, and then returning back to the banks.
So they're evolving door
Essentially, I mean, they're in and out of whether it be the Bush administration, the Obama administration, different positions within the cabinet that are governing finance, are individuals that are CEOs of banks. They might go back to being an honorary chair on the board of directors. It's this incestuous relationship between Wall Street and policymakers.
Sounds so corrupt.
Danny, you asked who runs America, and I say it's ignorance. And Thomas Jefferson warned of this, and that we needed a media who would inform the population, otherwise we would lose our democracy. So this is ignorance that is being forced upon you, criminalizing knowledge.
This is something that I was startled by when NASDAQ opened up, in Times Square, a big studio out front with a big window, and then I said, I'd love to tour the exchange. And, this was the time that Bernie Madoff was running NASDAQ, and they said, you can't tour the
Lagos
exchange.
ground
There is no
Airbus tree
exchange.
10.
It
Could you
looks
please
like
send
an
the baggage?
exchange. There's a building that says
Airbus tree 10
NASDAQ,
baggage
but
is on the way.
actual operations are computers.
Lagos ground Airbus tree 10. Could you please connect the jetway to the aircraft?
Airbus tree 10, the jetway is going to be connected.
These are computers that have virtually unlimited credit because the cost of credit is now zero, and the ability for a bank like JP Morgan with a $90 trillion balance sheet of derivatives, they can lend $1 trillion to a computer program to make a bet. If the bet doesn't work, then they get a federal bailout. If the bet works,
Lagos
then
ground
they get a bonus.
Airbus tree
So it's
10.
heads they win,
Could you
tails
please send the
we
catering
lose.
truck?
And this has been going on now for a number
Airbus
of years.
tree
but it's gotten
10, the
shockingly
catering
more
truck is on the road.
disproportionate and asymmetric.
This shift towards super-fast computers is just another example of the deeper shift we've seen in power as finance, in effect, takes over, with politicians courting Wall Street at global conferences and in private meetings, as George Soros explains.
It is actually symptomatic of the age, because you have tempting the financiers and the industrialists. So it does show a shift in the relative